Welcome to Not the Andrew Neil Show. Yet another episode, this time on it's actually the first day of summer.
Is it?
Well, if you divide the seasons into winter and summer, then this is summer.
Oh, right.
We've passed the equinox. The sun is this side of the equator. Let's put it that way, because I've been too sophisticated. Anyway.
Is that why it's shining?
And why everybody's wearing t-shirts, even though it's still cold.
Could be, yes.
Bloody cold wind coming off the North Sea.
Is it? Okay, guys. Well, look, so we're here to review, as per usual, First Minister's questions from Holyrood, or otherwise known as the Alex Salmon Show.
Today.
We'll stick to the well-tried routine, and we'll start off with overall impressions on performance today. We'll start with Nori.
Joanna Lamont, I don't know. She's moving her subject about a bit, which is good. But blankets and towels. If that's the best thing she can hit him with on the National Health Service, somebody's not doing any research. I mean, God knows how many patients they go through in a month, but I wasn't impressed. She put it over quite well, but it was all easily batted away. So I think she drops down this week. I think she's lucky to get a 5 out of 10.
Yeah, I'd have to definitely agree with that. Apart from that, it's the silly faces this week. The Jimmy Cranky faces. I mean, sorry. I mean, she's a shadow First Minister. I don't want Jimmy Cranky for the First Minister. Sorry, keep her face. I mean, she was silly faces. The eyebrows looking over her shoulder. Maybe she thought it was amusing. And also, the content. I'm sorry, if somebody is not doing a job in a hospital, it's not really the First Minister or the Secretary of State. A manager in the hospital needs pulled over the coals. That's what's needed. I thought she actually wasted her time, and I'd agree. 5 tops. I mean, I was really disappointed.
I have to go with you, I have to agree with you. I think the First Minister came back with what you would expect the First Minister to come back with. Satisfaction levels.
Yeah.
He can't, you can't expect the First Minister to know about one person's lack of a blanket. I mean, it's just a farce. Our overall performance, yes, you're right, Phil. She keeps going on about the crankies. Well, she doesn't go on about them, she keeps looking like one of the crankies. Although actually, I thought she was better coiffured and better made up than usual. Bland.
I mean, that head thing she's got going on.
Yeah, it's the eyebrows, and you know, it's almost like a show. And I'm sorry, it's not. It's content, and the content was lacking, and the presentation. No, sorry. I mean, she seems to have a week on, a week off, and a week, and well, she's off this week.
All right. I would have to say I would only give her 5. I mean, it's very poor. What about Ruth?
I felt sorry for Ruth. I mean, come on.
Yes, the day after a budget like that.
Yeah, we've just shafted all the pensioners in the UK.
How many? Yes, I know.
Yeah.
How many sound bites have there been? Like, was it Grand Theft Osbo
Oh,
yeah.
instead of Grand Theft Auto?
Every Scottish paper I've looked at, that's what they hit on.
Granny.
The granny tax.
Yeah. And apparently that was trending on Twitter. Granny tax last night.
And the millionaire.
Well,
15,000.
Well, there was that 15,000 people on over 150,000 that will be gaining, and 327,000 pensioners that are getting, for want of a word, shafted, rising to 500,000.
Have you heard the numbers? If you're on 150,000, it's worth 10 grand a year.
Yeah.
To you.
Oh no, some people are getting 42,000.
If you're on $250,000, it's a 40,000 bloody tax benefit.
Yeah.
They
That's
really
2
need.
jobs.
Have you any idea how much a new
4
Series
jobs in
7
some places.
BMW is? I mean, a 7 Series BMW, and they're putting the price of petrol up. You have to feel sorry for these.
Right. Well, we're all getting quite excited. So
Absolutely appalling.
back to the performance, Ruth.
Well, I'm going to give her 7 because that's twice in a row she's done it. I'll ask you a question about figures because you're good at figures, Alex, and then he couldn't come back with them, so she's delivered them. So that she's learning a methodology now. You know, she did the same last week. Could you tell me how many people did this, did that? He couldn't tell her. She told him. But yeah, she was not hiding nothing from the minute she walked into Holyrood today, really.
Yeah, she was just.
But I'll give her, again, she performs better, she looks better, she got a bit fiery, there was a bit of emotion in there today. Looked like she cared about it. So I'll give her a 7. Nah, I'll give her a 6.
Phil, what do you think of it there?
Well, I was going to go for a 6. I definitely thought she did better than Joanne. Apart from that, I would give her this an extra point just for actually knowing some of the figures, as opposed to Mr. Mundell, who doesn't appear to know one end of his body from the
Give her an
other.
extra point for turning up after that budget.
And she actually has a better presentation. Yeah, I'd give her 6. I mean, but she was in for a battering anyway. There was absolutely no way about that.
Well, I have to follow you guys. I mean, I thought Ruth, how much was she did try. She said how much was diverted for free prescriptions. There's a little bit of meat, there's remorseful meat in that question, in as much as that wealthy people, of course, don't need free prescriptions, but they get it anyway because it's a universal benefit. It's just a question of whether you believe in universal benefits or not, or whether they all have to be means tested.
Well, that was kind of Salmon's point, wasn't it? In Scotland, we believe in universal benefits. You guys down south, your office doesn't.
Well, it's the mark of a civilised, to my mind, civilised and progressive society. Because if it's a universal benefit, well, somebody with lots of money isn't getting it for nothing, because then you can have a progressive tax regime. So they are, in effect, paying it. You cannot have progressive tax regimes. You cannot have, as Salmon's look at this Scandinavian looking at it, I mean, when you look at their rates of tax, and they actually pay them quite happily, the majority of people, because they keep putting in social democratic governments over the decades, because they get a return on their money. They have a more coherent society, a fairer society. But of course, we're aping the Americans. The last thing we want, or particularly Tories, is a fairer society. Mm-hmm. They don't care about people.
Yeah, so Alex Salmon was a bit condescending to Ruth, because he did say about the deep unpopularity. Deep unpopularity is not an unusual status for the Tories, he said.
That's why the BMA standing against them.
Well, the line I noticed, and he repeated it later on, was I don't believe that the 15,000 millionaires in Scotland want a tax benefit on the back of the pensioners.
Well, that's true. So we're on to the budget, right enough, which was unavoidable today. We knew it would be.
Repeated that.
I thought she'd performed better than last week. I'd give her a 6.5. You know, I mean, there was
again, as I say,
she was dealt a very difficult hand given that after yesterday's
and
budget.
He did knock her right for 6. He did give her a good uppercut when he brought in Winston Churchill. When he brought in, I mean, Winston Churchill was the one that looked after pensioners, but then you see that Conservatives in those days, we had progressives and One Nations. They were still nasty, but not anywhere near as nasty as this lot.
Of course, Willie Rennie didn't get to speak.
And quite right too.
Yeah, thank God for small mercies. Eh?
Do you know, I mean, I saw Willie Rennie on the telly last night. Do you know what wasn't mentioned today at all? The agreement between the Scottish Government and the Westminster Government on Calman.
Well, apparently, yes, they agreed. Apparently, 2 days ago.
Not mentioned. And Willie Rennie was interviewed on it, and his spin on it is basically that the SNP have been shafted. They've lost the argument. Of the 6 things they took to Westminster, they only got 1 thing. The fact it was the most important thing out of all 6.
The ability to borrow money.
No. What they've said is it has to be, any changes have to be agreed between the Scottish Parliament and Westminster.
Right. Yeah.
So Westminster cannot dictate changes.
Well, I nearly suggested before we sat down today that perhaps we could do a separate programme about the budget and again the impact on Scotland, so maybe we can return to that.
Yeah.
It struck me that if we move on a bit now, it struck me that the other, shall we say, the chorus, what I mean by that is the backbench Labour MSPs that got to speak, I think there were 2 or 3 of them, kept sticking away at the same NHS issues. You've Dr. Richard Simpson, you've Neil Findlay going on about there seems to be some scandal in NHS Lothian. wasn't on the front page of the evening news last night that I got.
Effectively, what they've done is they've offered people appointments in England for operations and so on.
This has been going on for
And
a
they've
long,
done
long
it,
time.
But they've done it in such a way as it was impractical for people to accept the appointment.
Right.
They've then removed them from their
Ah,
list.
The lists. That's something, I mean, that is an issue that needs to be looked at, but it's not a new issue.
Creative accountancy, they're doing it, that's it, yeah.
That's
Nicola,
well old.
Nicola
Corrupt.
Sturgeon did not hold back. I mean, she was obviously annoyed
Yeah.
when she was asked about it.
But these are
Was
habits.
this yesterday's?
Yeah, the Lothian Health Board CEO just basically, he got interviewed and was asked if he would take responsibility. He said, "It is my responsibility and I'll make sure it doesn't happen again." In other words, I'm not resigning over this.
No.
Somebody's going to have to carry the can on it because it is a blatant and flagrant number hiding exercise.
Fair enough, but as I say, it's well old. I'm talking 6 months, maybe even a year old, that story.
Well, the problem for the SNP with it is they've gone on the figures that were presented, 2 months ago, and everything looked hunky-dory.
But I still-
and
I'm
it
still-
turns out that
no,
you
I'm
can't
sticking
trust
to-
those figures.
I'm sticking to my point. This is not a new story. This is a story that was around at least 6 months ago, if not a year ago.
Yeah.
Not specific as this, it wasn't.
Absolutely specific. Sending people to England, taking them off the waiting lists. This is not new.
This has probably just been brought up to embarrass
No.
again. But
Um,
whatever happens, I mean, I'm looking at our health service. I'm really glad I live in Scotland. I'm glad I have another health service. When I look south of the border, and actually you can blame the Tories and the Lib Dem coalition, or whatever you call them, coalition, for whatever you want, who started the encroachment into health service with polyclinics and everything else. I'm
Labour
sorry,
Party.
it wasn't the Tories.
And I sit here, as you know, frequently thinking about when I'm going to retire down south and spend more time with my grandchildren. And without a doubt, as time has gone by, the issue of
Health, yeah.
health care as I get older, it becomes an issue that I will take into account whenever I make the decision to go or not.
Probably more sensible to buy the Morel tickets. Stuart.
I also think that explains why the Labour Party are targeting NHS Scotland now. Essentially, the SNP are saying your health service in Scotland is safe in our hands. Now, the Labour Party
Can't say that.
can't say it, so they have to attack the standard.
32 Labour MPs voted in the earlier stages of the
Yep.
recently passed bill on the NHS in England. 32 Scottish Labour MPs voted to pass it.
Yeah, and I remember Alan
Only 2
Johnson.
months ago.
Johnson being quoted that these polyclinics that they were putting out in England, putting out to tender, which basically meant all the United Health American multinationals came in and underbid GPs and everybody else, and they took it over. I mean, they are.
Well,
They're going to lose it. Labour have said that they will renationalise. Sorry, they will probably find it legally incredibly difficult.
Do you know what percentage of the Lords have a direct link
I
to
know, I
private
noticed.
health?
Oh, I know, and I've noticed. it.
25%
Yeah,
of people sitting in the Lords
But they make a financial.
have a
financial
stake in it.
stake in it.
Alan Milburn, Patricia Hewitt, most of the Labour secretaries, the health secretaries under Labour, were all in cahoots as consultants when they were and getting huge amounts of money from private health companies,
Right.
Boots,
Yeah,
and
no,
everything
it
else.
is.
Appalling.
I noticed it. The question of different regional pay structures for public sector workers was a planted question. It was in a SNP. MSP brought it up. I don't think we got anything terribly clear on that, apart from a repeat of the situation of a living wage being
I think we've got very
Being-
clear ones, sure.
being paid to all public sector workers in Scotland that are answerable to the Scottish Government, and on top of that, the election bribe
Oh, that was clear
of
as a bell.
£7.20 living wage to all public sector employees in any council that the SNP run at after this upcoming election.
That's a much bigger one, because as far as Westminster is concerned, in statute Scotland's a region. And how are the SNP going to play that? If they cut the wages below whatever the national agreement is they're going to be up in arms. You're treating us like some wee
I think the
petty
SNP are probably sitting back and